Welcome to the Healed Approach podcast, the place where bold ideas meets real action in sustainability, inclusion, and innovation. I'm Rebecca Heald, and each episode I sit down with industry trailblazers from architects and construction leaders to change makers across the board to uncover transformative strategies driving a greener, more equitable future. Whether you're here to learn about passive house standards, embodied carbon, or how inclusion sparks innovation, this is the podcast to inspire your next big move. Ready to challenge the status quo? Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Healed Approach podcast, where today I'm joined by Alex Knight. Welcome, Alex Knight, and thank you, Alex Knight. Welcome, Alex. And thank you so much for being here today.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to chat to you today.
So Alex, I've been waiting for Alex to come on the podcast for such a long time. Alex is the founder of Stemazing, but let's go backwards a little bit. Alex was actually an unlikely engineer recovering wallflower. She went from shy imposter to award-winning engineer and founder, visiting professor and visible role model, speaking on stages and appearing on TV. But in 2019, Alex sold her house, left a job and followed her passion of equity and inclusion in STEM. So whilst I know a lot about STEM and I'm a massive advocate of what you're doing, can you explain to anyone who is listening who doesn't know about STEM and hasn't heard of Stemazing? Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing and the impact that you're having?
Yeah, absolutely. So STEM is the combination of science, technology, engineering, and maths. And really what we mean by STEM is any industries that encompass those four key areas predominantly. But of course, that covers so many different organizations and industries and academic subjects. So we are looking basically in Stemazing to try and help promote awareness of STEM careers and the opportunities available to anyone in STEM. Because at the moment we have, I would call it a diversity crisis in STEM, in that we just don't have enough diversity, and that's across all of the diversity characteristics: gender, ethnicity, sexuality, disability, neurodivergence. There's so almost like sort of like a typical type of person that you'd imagine would be in STEM, and that tends to be a middle class, middle-aged white man. And we need to mix that up. And we've been talking about it for years and years and years, as long as I can remember. I've been in engineering for over 20 years. And to be honest, we haven't moved the dial enough. And that's why I set up Stemazing, to try and bring this inspiration and inclusion revolution in STEM.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head there. And I say this a lot about how we have been talking about this for a lot, and we have, industry has, construction anyway, because obviously that's kind of where my where my work lies. And I know obviously as well, you're an engineer, so kind of similar background there. But I think that despite industry going into schools, like you say, the dial still isn't shifting enough. We're not having the impact that we want to be having. And, and why is that? I mean, I guess it's all well and good saying, the dial isn't shifting, so you started Stemazing, but what is it? What is it you're doing, I guess, to shift that dial? Because, I mean, I think massive kudos to you to literally just saying goodbye to everything and putting your heart and soul into this. So, it's obviously something that really matters to you. And I know it's got huge traction. And I know so many people in the industry that are, kind of advocating for what you're doing and following your programs. And it's fantastic. So, but tell us more about it and tell us how it differs to what people have been doing, I suppose, for all these years.
Yeah, so when I was in industry as an engineer, the predominant thing that people were doing to try and encourage more diversity into the talent pipeline, into then recruiting that talent, was going to things like university careers fairs, maybe doing some secondary school outreach, mock interviews, going and doing stuff where you're trying to give children work experience opportunities. All of that is fantastic and needs to still happen. But when I started digging into the research about where is the root cause of the problem, a lot of it around stereotyping, particularly things like gender stereotyping, is something that's established at a very young age. And the research that I was reading into before I really started with Stemazing was sort of like honing my ideas of where I wanted to focus. Found a number of different papers and scientific studies that showed that gender stereotypes around girls and boys' perceptions of what engineering could offer them as a career starts as young as 3 to 5 years old, where girls show less support for counter stereotypical STEM career choices like being an engineer. So unless we're reaching young children to challenge those gender stereotypes, nothing is really going to change, because those young people have already got unconscious bias that is creating self-limiting beliefs about what their options are before they even leave primary school. So before they go to secondary school, way before they make their GCSE choices, way before they decide what work experience they want and what career they might go to, into, and what they might study at university or do an apprenticeship in. So we have to reach young children. And that's why I felt like what I was doing was a bit different, in that I wanted to support existing women in STEM who maybe don't consider themselves role models, but they are, because everybody is a role model in some way, and basically help support and train them so that they can deliver really effective STEM outreach into primary schools. And all of the STEM outreach that I wanted to do had to be hands-on practical experiments and activities that the children would do themselves. So they get to live and breathe STEM for themselves. They get to be curious, experiment, and see that it's fun and accessible. And it's not just a kind of slightly boring talk with a load of PowerPoint slides about somebody else's career that doesn't mean anything to you and you can't relate to. So that's how I sort of crafted all these different things that I felt were super important in actually making a difference in terms of changing the face of what STEM will look like in the future. And use that foundation to build Stemazing. And then the key thing was I needed to get a lot of diverse role models, because I can't do that all myself. But what I found when I set up Stemazing, which was in 2019, just before the pandemic hit, was that when everything shifted online and I started doing online STEM outreach into primary schools, we could still reach a lot of young children and inspire them, as long as the activities were suitable for online delivery for a young age. So there's lots of things that sort of came together to create where we are now. But the key thing was diverse role models directly engaging with young children, so primary school children.
As a former primary school teacher, no, that is not correct. As a former secondary school teacher, sorry. I started out as secondary actually, but I actually went into diversity and inclusion in schools, and so I did a lot of work in primary schools to promote that. And so I'm totally on board with you. And I've been saying this before I came across the amazing work that you're doing. I was like, we're not. I agree with you. The work that we're doing needs to continue, but it needs to start sooner, because children make up their mind at a much younger age than we realise. That construction or engineering, isn't for them. And I think exactly what you said there. It's sound pedagogical science that, we need to go in and we need to be practical and we need to be experiential, because that's how children learn. And it needs to be in context, like you say. So it needs to be something that makes sense to them. And then they'll begin to make, those cognitive links that mean that it means something moving forward, and it's something that they can attach to, and it's something that they can see relevance to in their everyday lives. Because if we're trying to get them at year 9, year 10, year 11, they've already created this schema, okay, and then trying to fit the engineering, the construction into it is a little bit more difficult, I think. Not impossible, of course, because of course we can still catch people at those ages. But and for me, and I don't know how you feel about this. Yeah, it is. It is. It's a little bit like if you try to learn languages, as an adult, it's harder than if you do it when you're younger, And I don't know if that's, anyway, I don't want to go off into the science behind that, because I don't want to trip myself up, even though my master's is in bilingualism. But anyway, I wanted to just touch on as well about how I think as much as, and I completely agree with you that you need those diverse role models and, you know, across the board in terms of all of the diverse characteristics. It's not just about gender. And I think we also need to be speaking to teachers and parents, I think, educating them on the opportunities that the industry and STEM subjects can, you know, offer their children. I mean, I was talking to it was a community college in down in Brixton, and they were saying that whilst they have managed and encouraged young girls of ethnic minority backgrounds to go to university and to study STEM subjects, they were then coming back home and not realising how they could then use that to forge a career because their parents had never been a model in that situation. Their, you know, or their families, sorry, had never showed them that that's the way that they could move forward. They never had really any experience of it. So it's also about educating the educators and the parents. Well, parents are our primary educators, to be able to talk about these things and encourage these things and provide that perspective. That's my feeling around it anyway, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Completely agree. And the trouble is, it is hard to reach some demographics of parents or carers. I think in our experience, we mainly work in the classroom. So we'll go in and we'll run Stemazing Kids workshops alongside the teacher. So the teacher is upskilling as we're going as well. And we consider the teacher to be a partner in this, like we're collaborating and helping the teacher as well to raise their awareness of STEM careers and role models and how the primary curriculum links into STEM careers, even though engineering is not mentioned in the primary curriculum, but giving them examples of how what they're doing in maths or geography or history or science obviously can be related to STEM examples in real life that are making a difference. So there's that opportunity to work directly with the teacher. And then we have done work in sort of more family settings and say family fun days or fairs and things like that. But the problem is with that is that you get the families that are already keen to go to those things there. So you're almost preaching to the converted in a lot of those settings because they're out and willing to open their eyes to something new. What we are hoping to do with our Stemazing Kids sessions is where the children are inspired with the activities they do in the classroom and they all get a completion certificate that has a very simple description of what it is that we did, how it links to real life STEM careers. And we hope that we kind of encourage the children to carry on talking about it, experimenting and adding to their STEM creation because it's all just using simple household resources. So we encourage them to do that at home and continue the conversation with their parents and carers. Now, of course, that's out of our control and we don't know how much that is supported. And I completely agree. A lot more work needs to be done to bring in the parents and carers into this conversation in a way that works for them, not expecting them to turn up to a science fair, but in a way that brings them in an inclusive, accessible, completely not elitist or intimidating environment. And I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we've got the right answer for that yet. And it's definitely something that needs more attention.
This is something I did a lot of work on when I was doing my work in education. And you are right, it really is tricky and it really is challenging. You know, I used to work with lots of ethnic minority families, lots of vulnerable families, lots of traveller families. And it requires, and I think for you, for what you know, in terms of what Stemazing is doing, you know, you're like a third party again. And so for me, and I this is just kind of my, you know, what I observed and the experience that I had is, you know, it does come down to having that really close partnership with the schools that you're working with, because they've then got the partnership with the parents. And you're totally right, because the amount of times, you know, back in my early days of doing the work I was doing, when I'd do coffee mornings for parents to come in, or like you say, or, you know, after school sessions, and they wouldn't come because I wasn't building that relationship and getting to really understand and know what it was that they were expecting or wanting, because there's a reason that these families are sometimes harder to reach, and like you say, but they are the ones that we need to reach because they haven't already, necessarily seen the advantages or the opportunities that exist. So it is a big piece of work that I think it needs to be a shift in terms of, I think some of the work you're doing, and this is just my 2 pence worth, but I think some of the work that you're doing in terms of trying to diversify the curriculum and help teachers to see that, I think if they can communicate some of that information with parents, sending stuff home, sending, like you are trying to do, but if you can get them on board to do that, I think it's super powerful. Because again, a big part of what I used to do was to go in and help teachers see the opportunities within the curriculum that they could diversify and make them more culturally appropriate. But it is, it is a minefield. And I think there has to be a mindset shift in terms of how we are, because there is still, in education, there is still this expectation that, parents, as much as we say that we're trying to do more work to integrate parents into the education system, into schools, I still think schools are such busy places with so much going on, so much pressure, that there isn't enough time spent on, personalising the way that we do things, because we're just kind of expecting parents that have already been through the system, already understand, to just know what it is we're expecting of them. It's not necessarily the case because of all the different demographics, not just ethnic demographics, but social demographics, etc. So it's a minefield, sorry.
No, yeah, I think but it's a very important conversation, because if we really want to, like we started this conversation, if we really want to make step change improvement, we need to be pulling the right levers and supporting in the right way. So just doing more of the same and investing in more and more and more of doing the same that isn't actually making a difference is completely ludicrous. So we have to look at, okay, well, if there's these specific barriers, how do we invest in whatever initiatives are needed or additional support that's needed to break down those barriers? And certainly we are very focused on social mobility because of, again, research showed that young people or people who follow STEM careers are more likely to break down those social mobility barriers than if they go into any other sort of career choice. So it's a really amazing opportunity for breaking social mobility barriers if they do choose to pursue STEM. But how do you get them aware that there are opportunities for people like them in the first place? And so we always prioritize the schools that we work with based on free school meals or pupil premium, or if it's in Scotland, different deprivation indices, and getting local role models to engage with those children. And ideally, having similar accent, kind of, maybe went to a local school themselves and say, I did this. This is what I'm doing now. You can do it too. You don't have to be a maths genius. You don't have to be a science genius. There are so many careers available in STEM that are, even if it's like part of the STEM ecosystem, you don't have to become an engineer or a nuclear physicist yourself. You could go into project management or marketing or business development within the STEM ecosystem, because we need more people going into STEM, full stop. And it's not just about getting the masters in engineering or the PhD in science. It's actually wider than that as well. And some of our role models that we have aren't engineers or scientists or mathematicians. They are women who work in STEM, but in different enabling roles that allow STEM to work. And it's important that we showcase those as role models as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's interesting because I always used to feel, because again, my background is not in STEM, but like you say, I'm kind of working in the ecosystem. And I talked about my journey recently at a careers event. And I think, and a couple of schools came to me to ask me it was with sixth form students, and it wasn't kind of primary school or whatever, but they wanted me to talk about my business journey, how it is, so that young people can see, that you don't have to, like you say, have that STEM background to come into this industry or this sector. And, and that's something that I've almost learned as I've gone along. And it's interesting, though, as well, that you mentioned about how, because I want to unpick this a little bit, because I've got my kind of bias around it, I guess is the right word to use. But I'd love to talk to you more about this idea that STEM helps with social mobility and potentially, I guess, integration. Why do you think that is? What do you see happening there?
I think the opportunities available in STEM careers, because people who are in STEM are in demand, and we know that, particularly if you look at like engineering careers, I think research from Engineering UK showed recently that 1 in 4 job vacancies in the UK are for engineering roles. So we have a massive shortage of engineers. We are crying out for people to fill those roles. So the opportunities available if you go into that industry are huge. Now, I'm not saying it's just a walk in the park to get a job in engineering, because I know a lot of students at university who are struggling to get their first graduate jobs, and it's still a competitive market. But the industries have the demand, and we need to create the supply of people that are with the right skills. And once you get those skills, they're so transferable and in demand from so many different industries as well. I mean, look at the finance industry, investment industries, things like that, that also try and recruit a lot of people who, for example, have engineering degrees, because they are those sort of problem solving skills, innovation skills, critical thinking skills. So once you've got that tool set of skills, it opens up a world of possibilities. And I think that's one of the key things that helps break down those barriers of social mobility, is that it's a career where you can clearly see you're making a difference. So it gives you that rewarding sense of purpose and fulfillment, which is very important for self-worth, self-belief, confidence building. And then you've got these skills that are in demand. So in terms of your value, you're a very valuable commodity at that point. Now, we still have a long way to go, because I think people who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds struggle to get into STEM more than others, because I think of these stereotypes and the opportunities not being visible in certain areas around the country. So, but the opportunity is so huge to get into those areas and demonstrate that, you don't have to have top grades in maths and science to go and do these kind of careers that then give you this wealth of skills and value to be able to go out there into the job market. And I think a huge bit is around confidence building and self-belief, that you feel you've got something valuable to offer, because that's so important, as you probably know from all your teaching work and all the work you've done since. It's like how much that makes a difference to a person as to whether they will actually pursue and get that opportunity.
That's why I really feel passionate as well about, linking the industry more, not linking the industry more, but making it more visible about the link between sustainability. Because I think if we can engage younger people in that purpose to do better, that purpose to leave the world in a better place, and them seeing the link between the industry and that will give them so much more drive and motivation. But I also, I completely agree with everything that you've said there in terms of the skills that you build and you grow and you nurture when you go into STEM subjects. But I don't know, again, this is just me speculating from, again, my own observations and experience, but is there a link, I guess, between the neurodiversity and what STEM offers? Because I genuinely feel, and if I had, I have, I've got ADHD, probably other stuff going on too. And I feel like for the first time ever since coming into the construction industry, I'm able to use my creative thinking more, my problem solving skills, all of those things that I actually found more difficult to embrace in earlier stages in my career. So again, this is anecdotal stuff from me. So I really would be interested. I mean, this is the other reason as well. Like, I want to see change in the construction industry because my children, they are both neurodiverse. They would be a massive asset to the construction industry. And if they can come into an industry that is safe for them, that is fun, interesting, etc., they'll do amazing. And the industry, again, will benefit from them. I'm not one of, because a lot of people, when I speak to the parents, like, I never want my children to go into construction. I never do. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, why? It's got fantastic. I do understand why people say that. I see the stuff that happens in the industry as well, but I also see all the positive stuff and how it can really be great for them, given that they're neurodivergent.
Yeah. The IET did a bit of research recently looking at neurodivergence in engineering and technology to show that actually, there's a large proportion of people working in engineering and technology that probably are neurodivergent, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, and that these sort of the careers where skills like critical thinking, analytical thinking, problem solving, innovation, attention to detail, but thinking from a different perspective, like, actually are so valuable and so needed that, we should be proactively encouraging more people who are neurodivergent to join our industries, because their skills are, their particular skills, because of their neurodivergence, actually is exactly the kind of skills that we're looking for. And with our Stemazing community, we've got a number of our Stemazing women role models who are neurodivergent. And one comes to mind, Anna Preston, who didn't know that she was autistic until later in her adulthood. And then once she got that diagnosis, like, everything made sense to her. She's like, it all makes sense now. And how she's gone through this journey of hiding it through to celebrating it, because she recognizes the value she brings. But part of that process that I've seeing her over the last couple of years is that recognizing she's a role model and celebrating her neurodivergence as a key part of her story as a role model, and how it really has the capacity to inspire others, has helped her take ownership of it and really come to value it and celebrate it, rather than feeling like it's something that you have to hide. So if we have more role models like that celebrate neurodivergence and the value it brings, just think how many young people who maybe don't even know that they're neurodivergent, or maybe they do, but they can recognize their characteristics that align and are kind of similar to other role models who have that similar kind of characteristics, personality or neurodivergence. And then that could empower them to go on and do something similar.
I could not agree more, honestly. And, I've seen this in my own experience, on my own journey. I've witnessed it with my own, because there's still so much stigma. I've witnessed it with my own children. When my son got his diagnosis, his initial reaction, he was absolutely mortified by it. And he was like, "You've ruined my life. You've put this spotlight on me." And I was like, but darling, we're very similar. I've got the same, neurodivergence. That's why I can do what I do. Because my kids are always looking at me. My kids will say, "How do you do everything you do, Mum? How do you?" And I'm like, "Why do you think I do? How do you think I've achieved everything that I have?" Because my brain works a little bit differently, like yours. So even in that little, in my home environment, that's happening. Does that make sense? But
totally,
there is still, like I say, so much stigma. My son is 10 years old, and already he feels like his world's falling apart because, because of the way still that society is making people feel about it. And it's a shame, because we need to embrace it. Like it does have to change. But I'm seeing it.
But I think role modeling and showing the positive stories, because we've had so many years of negative stories around neurodivergence that it's something that people, have to endure or struggle with, rather than seeing the positive side of that. Like, obviously there's going to be the challenges, but there's the opportunities as well, and we've not been very good at bringing out those opportunities. But the more we do, the more, and I think, if, from what I see in industry, we are getting better at that inclusive way of thinking, where we recognize there's strength and value in people being different. And that is all part of this. It's like, it sounds cheesy, but it is a journey that we're all on with our open-minded thinking of how do we recognize, first of all, and then utilize people's individual strengths based on, who they are as a person, and how their brain works and how their body works. And I feel like I'm seeing definitely improvement and progress around how that is treated in the workplace and valued in the workplace, and not just tolerated and accommodated, but actually utilized in a really positive way, and people being more open about it. And it's easy for me to say because I'm not neurodivergent, but giving sort of like our role models, empowering them to own their unique strengths, whatever they are, and be more visible and vocal about them, actually empowers those around them, their peer group as well, not just young children, but their peer group of who may be dealing with something that they're currently hiding, and then feel more empowered to open up. And then when we get more of this like collective empowerment, it benefits everyone.
100%. I've seen it. I've seen, through being open and honest about my journey, through some of the training that I've done and the people that I've met, I've seen people in really kind of influential positions that have then gone on to really advocate for, for more inclusion, diversity, neurodiversity, awareness within organizations, because it's like, well, if someone else can do it, then I can do it. Because you always, like you say, I spent years thinking there was something wrong with me, trying to hide who I was. And I'm just so grateful that, because nobody understood that back, 30, 40 years ago 43 years ago when I was born, but, and whereas now at least I can have that little bit, as tricky as it is, having children the same as you, it's also amazing to be able to understand.
Yeah.
But I guess I just have, because, what kind of one final question. I mean, I could talk to you about this forever, but what would you say that things are changing, and I do agree that things are. It needs to quicken up a little bit, but, I think what's the one thing that if you could see shift tomorrow in this industry, what would it be?
Well, I think being realistic about, we're not going to all of a sudden get, a massive percentage shift change in the number of 16, 17-year-olds choosing to go into STEM. The one thing that I think will make a big difference is if three things that are sort of all around the same point, really. Number one, that government policy around STEM examples and diverse role models being in the curriculum is prioritized, so that even without industry getting involved, like the curriculum itself supports more awareness of STEM careers that could suit everyone with diverse role models. Number two is that business leaders invest in longer term thinking around shifting the dial around diversity and inclusion in STEM. So actually investing in primary school STEM outreach volunteering for their role models, but not just putting it on them as a requirement, actually supporting them to do it and creating the environment which means they can thrive in those situations. So volunteer days, paid volunteer days, paid training to support them, resources and tools that they can easily access, supporting them with links of how to connect with schools, and building and fostering those relationships with local trusts and, academies and basically from like infant and primary right up to secondary and college level in your local community. So business leaders feeling like this is part of their business strategy to broaden their diverse talent pool, but recognizing it has to be a long-term strategy. It's not going to make any difference if they just double their investment in going into colleges. And the third is for every individual listening to recognize that they are a role model and that they can have more influence and power than they possibly realize just by being more visible and vocal as a role model, by speaking up in meetings, at conferences, going into schools, volunteering to go and chat to your local primary school in an assembly or run a workshop with a bunch of year threes. That will honestly have such a big impact, but people just kind of almost think that it's a bit insignificant. But I know from all the work we do, just every single engagement with a person in STEM leaves a memory with those kids that has the potential to transform their future.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's all of the little things that gain traction, and we seem to think that our little drop in the ocean won't make a difference, but it will. It's not about causing a riot or a revolution in one go. It's we're causing a revolution, but with tiny little steps in the right direction. And I love what you said there, that second piece, I think, because this is where I kind of tend to focus a lot of the work that I do. But I think I completely agree with you. I think I said that this is the one thing that I wanted to see change when I was on a panel recently. But I think it has to start with, leadership. It's got to start with leaders within organisations, within businesses, in construction, really recognising and understanding, what diversity of thought means, what cognitive diversity means, and so that they can then really be bought into it. And I do see it happening. I've got a meeting this afternoon with a local business, quite a large one, that sees it and gets it. We just need more of the leadership teams to be on board with that, so that it is integrated within the culture and the fabric of what they're doing, rather than it being an add-on.
Completely agree.
Thank you so much, Alex. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I think what you're doing is going to have such an impact. Can you? Well, it already is. I'm not saying it's not. It already is, but obviously, you've got so much more that you want to achieve and you will achieve. But so, can you let people know where it is that they can find you if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is stemazing.co.uk, and we're also very active on social media. You can follow us on LinkedIn at Stemazing or Instagram at Stemazing1. And we have a number of different ways people can get involved in what we do. So for women and non-binary people, they can join our free award-winning program, which is called the Inspiration Academy. And that's an online 3-month program. We run twice a year. So, sign up to our newsletter, follow us on social media. You can find out when to apply for that. Any businesses that want to partner with us and get involved in what we're doing to support their employees with having more impact as role models, they can reach out to me and I'm happy to have a chat with them. And also, it's not just women in STEM. We have a Stemazing community for allies as well. And so anyone in STEM, all genders, can get involved in what we're doing and support through our mentoring programs, through the different STEM activities we do in schools, and through supporting each other as a community as well, because that's super important. So yeah, lots of ways people can get involved.
I'm really pleased you mentioned that, actually, because that was one of the questions that I forgot once the conversation was about, is it just about women? But you've kind of covered that in your summary there. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who has been listening to this episode. Please make sure that you do go and check out what Alex and everybody is doing at Stemazing. Please make sure that you also do leave us a 5-star review, like the podcast, share it with your audience, because that's the only way that we're going to get this message out there more. Thanks again ever so much, Alex, and thank you everybody for listening, and I'll see you here next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Healed Approach podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Let's spread the word and drive the change our industry desperately needs. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn or at rebecca-heal.co.uk. And as always, keep pushing boundaries and making impact. Until next time.